Today I'm going to show you how to use a window to create a contemporary lookbook shoot. Hey everybody, Lindsay Adler here, and as a fashion and beauty photographer, one of the things that I'm hired to shoot is something called a lookbook. Fundamentally, a lookbook is when a designer is looking to showcase their pieces. So they'll come out with a new collection, new designs, and they want to show what they look like. Now, in the past, very often it was super simple with no style. Used to be kind of an average gray background. It would have the subject in really rigid poses. And it would often be, here's a pose from the front, the side, and the back. However, things have changed. So what I want to do is I want to show you a little bit more of a contemporary approach to a lookbook. Now still, you want to showcase the clothing, and so you really need to pay attention to details, but it's okay to show a little bit more of a stylistic approach or a little bit more of a visual approach that represents the brand in the images. So for example, for this shot, I'm going to base my entire scene and set and light based upon the piece of clothing. So I want to make sure that I'm showing the texture of the pleats, but I also really want to play up that beautiful beige tone. So here's what we have going on for the set that I've built. We're using a gravity backdropped hand-painted canvas background. And then on the ground, I actually have a muslin background, but I've turned it over and we're using the back. And so that's to give me kind of a monochromatic scene. And by the way, you don't have to use a muslin background on the floor. You can absolutely use a painter's tarp. It would still give you that nice beige look. Now, I wanted to make this a little bit more interesting than just a subject in front of a background. And so I've added a prop. And the reason I like this is it gives the subject a little bit of ability to interact with it, try different poses, sitting, standing, leaning. And so I have introduced an old painter's ladder, which I got from an antique shop. It's super inexpensive, and the fact that it's worn, I think actually makes it a little bit more interesting. So we've got our background, we've got our floor, we've got our subjects, we've got our color palette, and now onto the lighting. So we're going to use completely natural light. The idea is that I want something soft, even, minimal shadows, just really glowing throughout the entire scene. And so what I've done is I've placed a large window to the right-hand side of the frame. That is going to be the main directionality of the light. But I already said I don't want any shadows. And so opposite that window, I've placed a white V-flat. That white V-flat catches the light in the room, catches the light from the window, bounces it back in, fills in the shadow, and it just gives me beautiful flat light. Now, one of the things that you want to pay attention to when you are shooting window light is that you want to make sure you've turned off all overhead light. Originally, I actually had the overhead lights on here and I forgot, and it gave me this ugly yellow color cast. So you got to turn off your ambient light, and you also want to pay attention to any direct light in the scene. You'll notice that there is no direct sunlight hitting my subject, and that is very much on purpose. I don't want to have hot spots on the clothing since this is a lookbook image. I want everything to be really even, and I want to be able to see the texture of the clothing. So even though there is direct sunlight coming in through the window, I made sure that I positioned the V-flats, I made sure I positioned the background and the subject in a way that they weren't being hit by the sunlight. Now, if you are trying this with your own window light on a sunny day, be sure to experiment with the position of your V-flat. Now I have it opposite the window, but try moving it around a little bit more to the front. Maybe catch some of that direct sunlight. Maybe pull it more into the shade. Each position of that V-flat is going to make a drastic difference in how it looks on your subject. And so you should give it a try and pay attention to how it's flattering the texture of the clothing. In this case, I am having it out of the sun, off to the side, just lifting up the shadows and flattening out the shot. For this shoot, I'm going to be using the Canon R5 and the Canon RF 50mm 1.2 lens. Now the reason I've selected this lens is that although I love the background, I love the texture of it, I don't want it to become a distraction. So I'm going to be shooting pretty wide open, 2.2, 2.0, 1.2 even, so that I cast the subject just a little bit sharper and the background just a little bit more out of focus. And I think it will simplify the scene. For that reason, I'm going to be using my face and eye tracking to make sure that I'm getting the eye closest to the camera in focus. Now I want to make sure that I'm not shooting too wide of an aperture because I do want to make sure that the clothing is sharp, and I want to make sure I can see the detail in the fabric. Now when photographing a lookbook, you have to remember that it is about the clothing. Yes, you want to flatter your subject. Yes, you want to have an interesting scene as you see in this case, but you want to make sure the clothing looks good. So when I am posing my subject, I'm having her interact with a ladder or turn or sit, I'm fundamentally making sure that the clothing is falling in a way that is flattering in every single shot. So I have the light looking beautiful, my subject and the set looking beautiful, and now it's time to get the shot. Now, as I'm posing my subject, whether she's interacting with a ladder or she's standing and posing and moving, I have to remember that fundamentally, this isn't just a creative fashion shoot. This is actually the opposite. This is a lookbook. So it's really important that I'm constantly flattering the clothing. So I need to pay attention to the details. How is the clothing falling on this subject? Is there anything out of place? So I'm constantly paying attention to these details to make sure the clothing is looking its best. All right, so now let's go get that shot. What I find really exciting is that shooting lookbooks is a regular gig for many fashion photographers, and it used to be so boring, but it doesn't have to be anymore. And so the next time that you're shooting a lookbook, consider what you could do to add to the shoot. So learn a little bit about the collection, learn a little bit about the brand. And so what could you possibly introduce to the scene to make it say a little bit more about that designer? So if you like this more contemporary approach to lookbook photography and you want to learn more about commercial photography, definitely visit learnwithlindsay.com. I have classes all about the business side of commercial photography as well as the lighting. In fact, I have a commercial lighting recipe guide where I give you everything you need to recreate the setups that make me the most money. If you like this shot in particular, be sure to check out the links in the description below for all the gear I use, and definitely check out Adorama.com. And if you want to learn more about fashion photography, whether you're a natural light shooter like you see here or you love to shoot in the studio, be sure to like and subscribe because I have so many more videos just like this one coming your way. See you next time, guys.